11 nations spent World War II building bigger and bigger anti-tank guns, and almost every single one of them got outpaced by enemy armor within a year or two of fielding their answer. Some of these guns ended up too heavy to move, others got cancelled for being too powerful, then rushed back into production months later. Germany. We have the 3.7-centimeter Pak-36. It entered service in 1936, weighed only 328 kilograms, and could be dragged into position by its own crew without a vehicle. It first saw combat in the Spanish Civil War, where it performed well against the light tanks of the era. By the invasion of the Soviet Union, its standard shell could barely manage 30 millimeters of penetration at 500 meters, and even the later tungsten-cored round only pushed that into the 60 millimeter range at point-blank distance. It was cheap, it was everywhere, and by 1941 it was already obsolete, which is a very German combination. Next, we have the 4.2-centimeter Pak-41, a stopgap built on the Pak-36's own carriage. It used the Gerlich squeeze bore principle, tapering its barrel from about 41 millimeters at the breech down to 29 millimeters at the muzzle to squeeze extra velocity out of a tungsten core round. That got it to roughly 87 millimeters of penetration at 500 meters, nearly triple the standard Pak-36 shell. The catch was tungsten. Germany did not have enough of it, so only around 136 guns were ever built before production stopped in May of 1942. A brilliant piece of physics undone by a spreadsheet problem. Let us continue with the 50mm Pak-38. Introduced in 1940 on a split-trail carriage, it fired a longer, higher-velocity round than the Pak-36 and could manage roughly 130 millimeters of penetration at close range with tungsten core ammunition. For about a year, this was Germany's answer to everything the Allies could field. Then the T-34 and the KV-1 showed up in numbers, and the gun that had been the answer quietly became the stopgap before the real answer. Moving on to the 7.5-centimeter Pak-40, the gun this entire war is remembered by. Over 20,000 were built, making it the most produced German anti-tank gun of the conflict. Weighing about 1,425 kilograms, it could punch through roughly 135 millimeters of armor at medium range, enough to kill nearly anything the Allies put in front of it through most of the war. It also became the standard main gun bolted onto tank destroyers like the Marder and the Nashorn, because once you build the best gun of the war, you put it on everything with wheels or tracks. We have the 7.5-centimeter Pak-41/1, the larger and far less successful sibling of the 4.2-centimeter squeeze bore gun. It tapered its bore from 75 millimeters down to 55 millimeters, and with tungsten core ammunition, could theoretically punch through nearly 200 millimeters at close range. In practice, tungsten shortages, brutal barrel wear, and a barrel life measured in a few hundred rounds meant only around 150 were ever built. It was supposed to replace the Pak-40. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about chasing performance you cannot sustain. Next, we have the 7.62-centimeter Pak-36/R, another improvisation, and arguably the best one. Germany captured enormous numbers of Soviet F-22 divisional guns in 1941, relined them to accept German 75mm ammunition, and fitted a mouth brake. The result rivaled the vaunted 88 in penetration and became one of the most effective anti-tank guns Germany fielded during the 1941 and 42 crisis, built entirely from someone else's artillery. There is something almost insulting about beating the Red Army with their own guns.
We have the 8-centimeter PAW-600, developed far too late to matter. It used a high-low pressure system that let it fire a shaped charge round capable of about 140 millimeters of penetration at 750 meters, all while weighing only around 600 kilograms, a fraction of the Pak-40. Roughly 260 were built between December of 1944 and March of 1945. It was a genuinely clever weapon, arriving at a genuinely pointless moment. Moving on to the 8.8-centimeter Pak-43, widely considered the best dedicated anti-tank gun of the war. Mounted on a low cruciform carriage, it could penetrate around 190 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters, enough to kill an Allied tank before that tank's own gun could return the favor. The trade-off was weight. At nearly 3,700 kilograms, moving it into position was its own small military operation. Next, we have the 8.8-centimeter POC 43/41, the same devastating barrel and ballistics as the 43, bolted onto a cheaper improvised carriage built from leftover LEFH-18 howitzer and POC 40 components. Crews nicknamed it the Scheuntorn, the barn door, because its tall silhouette made it almost impossible to hide. Same killing power, worse camouflage. Not exactly a compromise anyone wanted. We finished Germany with the 12.8-centimeter POC 44, the largest towed anti-tank gun to see any kind of service in the war. Derived from the gun intended for the Maus Super Heavy Tank project, it weighed roughly 10 tons and needed a dedicated half-track just to move it. Only a handful were ever built and used, mostly around the Ruhr in the final weeks. Its penetration figures were enormous. Its tactical usefulness was basically zero, since a gun that takes half an hour to reposition is not an anti-tank gun anymore. It is a fixed fortification with wheels. Moving on to Britain, we have the Ordnance QF 2-pounder, the standard British anti-tank gun of the early war. At 40 millimeters, it was effective against the thin-skinned German tanks of 1940 and 41. Its most notorious flaw was that it was never issued a high explosive round, meaning crews facing infantry or soft targets simply had nothing useful to fire. A gun that can kill tanks but cannot fire at anything else is a gun designed by a committee that never expected to lose a battle. Let us continue with the Ordnance QF 6-pounder, which began replacing the 2-pounder from 1942 onward. At 57 millimeters, it could manage around 74 millimeters of penetration at 1,000 meters with APC-BC ammunition, a real improvement, and it also armed early Churchill and Crusader tank variants. For about a year, it kept British anti-tank crews competitive against the Panzer III and IV. We have the Ordnance QF 17-pounder, Britain's best anti-tank gun of the war, and the gun that finally let a Sherman tank, in its Firefly form, fight a Tiger on something like even terms. At 76.2 millimeters and entering service in 1943, it could exceed 140 millimeters of penetration with the right ammunition. It arrived roughly 2 years after the Wehrmacht already knew it needed something like this, which tells you everything about the pace of wartime procurement on both sides.
Next, we have the 17/25-pounder, better known as Pheasant, an emergency hybrid built by mounting the 17-pounder's barrel onto the lighter 25-pounder field gun carriage. It was rushed into service ahead of the Normandy landings because there were not enough proper 17-pounder carriages to go around. Same devastating gun, same penetration figures, but a taller silhouette and a lighter shield that gave crews noticeably less protection. Sometimes field expedient just means we ran out of the good version. We have the 37mm gun M3, America's standard anti-tank gun heading into the war. It could manage roughly 53 millimeters of penetration at 500 yards, which was adequate against early war German armor and hopelessly inadequate against everything that came after. It also armed the Stuart light tank, so American crews got to experience its shortcomings from 2 different vehicles at once. Next, we have the 57mm gun M1, essentially a license-build version of the British 6-pounder, adopted into American service in 1942. It performed roughly as well as its British counterpart, which is to say, a solid mid-war gun that was already being outpaced by German armor before most units had finished training on it. We finished the United States with the 3-inch gun M5, the Army's dedicated heavy-towed tank destroyer gun, capable of around 88 millimeters of penetration at 1,000 yards. It traced its lineage back to an existing anti-tank gun family, which is a very American way of building an anti-tank gun. Take something that already shoots things out of the sky, point it sideways. Let us continue with the Soviet Union, starting with the 37mm anti-tank gun M1930, known as the 1K. It was based on a German Rheinmetall design purchased in 1930, making it the Soviet Union's first dedicated anti-tank gun. It was obsolete well before Operation Barbarossa and had already been largely withdrawn from frontline service by 1941. We have the 45mm anti-tank gun M1932, the 19K, a bored-out development of the 1K that became the Red Army's standard interwar anti-tank gun. Soviet crews nicknamed the whole 45mm family Sorokopyatka, and it did reasonable work against the light tanks of the late 1930s.
Next, we had the 45mm anti-tank gun M1937, the 53K,
an improved carriage version that became the backbone of Soviet anti-tank defense through 1941 and into 1942. Against German medium armor with applique plating, its shells increasingly bounced rather than penetrated, which earned the gun and its crews a much darker nickname among the infantry they were supposed to protect. We have the 45mm anti-tank gun M1942, the M42, a rushed wartime upgrade with a lengthened barrel and higher velocity to claw back some of the performance the 53K had lost against improving German armor. It was a patch, not a fix, and everyone at the front knew it. We finished the Soviet Union with the 57mm anti-tank gun M1941/43, the ZiS-2, and this one comes with a genuinely strange story. It was so powerful when introduced in 1941 that Soviet planners thought it was overkill against German tanks Germany actually had, and production was halted. Then, the Tiger and Panther arrived. The Red Army suddenly needed exactly the gun it had canceled, and the ZiS-2 went back into production in 1943. Somewhere, a Soviet procurement officer had a very bad week. Moving on to France, we have the 25mm Hotchkiss anti-tank gun Model 1934, the standard French infantry anti-tank gun heading into 1940. For its small caliber, it was reasonably effective against early German light tanks, but 25mm was already a marginal caliber by the time the Battle of France began. Let us continue with the 25mm APX anti-tank gun Model 1937, a more mobile split-trail development of the same caliber and the same round, more maneuverable than the Hotchkiss version, but sharing the same fundamental problem. A 25mm shell was running out of relevance. We finish France with the 57mm APX anti-tank gun Model 1941/43, one of the better performing anti-tank guns of the 1940 campaign. Weighing about 1,070 kilograms and firing an APC-BC round at roughly 855 meters per second, it could genuinely outfight contemporary German armor on paper. France built over 1,200 of them. It did not matter nearly as much as the gun's specifications suggest it should have.
Czechoslovakia. We have the 3.7cm KPUV VZ-34, a Škoda design and Czechoslovakia's standard anti-tank gun before the German occupation absorbed the country's entire arms industry. Next, we have the 3.7cm KPUV VZ-37, an improved split-trail successor to the VZ-34. After the occupation, captured examples were pressed into German service, a pattern that would repeat with almost every piece of Czechoslovakian hardware built after 1935. We finished Czechoslovakia with the 4.7cm KPUV VZ-38, a genuinely potent gun for its era. Worth being precise here, this is the same weapon Germany later fielded under its own designation, the 4.7cm Pact. It is not a separate German gun. It is a Czechoslovakian design wearing an occupier's paperwork, and it deserves credit under its own name. We have the 37mm Bofors VZ-36, a Polish license-built version of the famous Swedish design. It was a genuinely competent gun for 1939, capable of dealing with the German light tanks and armored cars it actually encountered during the invasion. Captured examples were pressed into German service as the PaK 36P, which by this point in the video should surprise absolutely no one. Moving on to Belgium, we have the 47mm FRC Model 1931, nicknamed the Quatsept by the soldiers who used it. Weighing around 515 kilograms and firing an AP round at roughly 720 meters per second, it performed creditably during the Battle of Belgium in 1940. Over 750 were built, and captured examples went on to serve with both Germany and Hungary, because apparently no anti-tank gun in this war was allowed to retire quietly. Italy. We have the Cannone da 47-32 Modello 35, based on the Austrian Böhler design. It doubled as an infantry support gun and could be broken down into loads for pack animal transport, which made it genuinely useful in North Africa, where roads were a theoretical concept. It was also exported widely, including to Romania, which we are about to get to.
Next, we have the Cannone da 47-32 Modello 39, an incrementally improved version of the same caliber and concept. Same core idea, minor refinements, same limitations against anything heavier than light and early medium armor.
Let us continue with Romania, starting with the 47mm Schneider Concordia Model 1936, a French Schneider design produced under license at the Concordia Works in Ploiești. It served as Romania's primary anti-tank gun in the opening phase of the Eastern Front campaign, right up until Soviet armor got heavy enough to make 47mm feel like a rounding error. We finish Romania with the 75mm Reșița Model 1943, arguably the most interesting gun on this entire list because it is not really one design, it's 3 designs wearing a trench coat. Romanian engineers combined the carriage and recoil system of the Soviet ZiS-2, the gun shield of the German Pak-40, and the barrel and chamber of Romania's own Vickers Reșița anti-aircraft gun. The result weighed about 1,430 kilograms, fired a 6.6 kilogram AP round at over 1,000 meters per second, and could double as a field gun thanks to a 35-degree elevation range, more than the Pak-40 could manage. Historian Mark Axworthy has called it arguably the most versatile gun of its class built during the war. Fewer than 400 were made, and it stayed in Romanian service, astonishingly, into the late 1990s. We have the 40mm 40M anti-tank gun, Hungary's standard towed anti-tank gun and a licensed derivative of the German 3.7cm Pak-36, borne out to 40mm. It's easy to confuse this with the far more famous 40M Nimrod self-propelled gun, but they are different animals. The Nimrod is a tank chassis-mounted Bofors autocannon, while this is a conventional split-trail towed piece. Hungary did not have the industrial base to design something original, so it took a proven German platform and made it just different enough to call its own. Let us continue with Japan, starting with the Type 94 37mm gun, Japan's standard anti-tank gun for most of the war. Low velocity, modest penetration, and increasingly outclassed as American medium tanks arrived in the Pacific. Some units eventually stopped using it as an anti-tank weapon altogether and relegated it to general infantry support, which is a polite way of admitting a gun has failed at its one job. We finish this entire catalog with the Type 1 47mm mobile anti-tank gun, Japan's best dedicated anti-tank weapon of the war. Entering service in 1942, it offered a genuine improvement in penetration over the Type 94 and was also mounted on the Type 1 Honi tank destroyer. The problem was never the gun. The problem was that Japan built too few of them, too late, against opponents who were already fielding armor the Type 1 struggled to defeat even on a good day. 38 guns, 11 nations, and one very consistent pattern. Whoever built the biggest gun first usually lost the advantage within about 18 months. If you want the vehicles these guns actually rode into battle on, the tank destroyers are getting their own video next. Subscribe if you don't want to miss it.